Okay, welcome wherever you are. Good to be here. Today we're on the 10th day of the month of Shvat 5776, and today's subject, God willing, usually like we're a little bit on the late train. We're taking the late train, but today we're taking the early train. We're going to, usually when we speak about a subject, we usually speak about it like after, a couple days after it finished, you know? Like you give a class on Purim, after Purim. But today we're going to be early birds, and we're going to beat the traffic by starting early to speak about Tu B'Shvat, which is coming up this coming Monday, Yom Sheni, this coming Monday, Sunday night actually. So we're going to get an early start on it, and this class, the title is going to be Moving on Up to the Holy Land. Not moving on up to the east side for the piece of pie, but we're moving on up to the Holy Land. Okay. Number one, we have a interesting verse in Psalms 80. It says the following: we will take Gefen mi Mitzrayim Tasia Tigaresh Goyim v'Titateh. We will, Jewish people will leave Egypt, so to speak, with loaded down with grapes, and then they will uproot the Gentiles from the land of Israel. I'm not going to get into right now what's the connection between grapes and Egypt. There's a tremendous connection. We're not going to get into it right now. But once again, we know one of the 7 species that the land of Israel was blessed with. And of course, Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is really a holiday of the land of Israel, because we're talking about the special laws that pertain to Tu B'Shvat, laws of Trumot, Masrot, Orla, different tithes that we give to the Kohanim, to the Leviim. You're not allowed to eat various fruits for 3 years. The 4th year, Neta Ravai. So it's a very, very special holiday for the land of Israel. And that's why for many hundreds of years, or maybe even beyond that, Jews, even though they were not able to obtain fruits from the land of Israel, they still ate fruits that represented the land of Israel. So if you were somewhere in Portugal, you would still take, let's say, a date, because even though it's not from the land of Israel, you would still take it. It would remind us of the land of Israel, because dates are one of these 7 special species that the land of Israel is blessed with. Okay, so the Chazal tell us on this psalm, it says that when a person wants to plant a vineyard, what do? First, they have to uproot all the rocks. There's rocks and etc. that are in our way. First, we have to uproot that, and then we could come out and plant the vineyard. So that's the way too. When we come into the land of Israel, of course, there's always been nations here. When Abraham comes into the land of Israel, with Sarah and 1 million converts, according to the Zohar Kadosh, who's waiting here? There are many, many nations here. Also, when Joshua comes into the land, who's waiting? The nations of the world are waiting. 6 nations here. One ran away. Also, in the time of the Second Temple, there were also, we spoke about a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we talk about the Samaritans were there to, quote unquote, to welcome us. Welcoming like that. No red carpet treatment there. Okay, so once again, we see the connection. There's a connection between grapes and expelling the enemies of Israel from the land of Israel. Now, think about this. Very interesting. The first time we see the word kadosh, holiness or separation, same thing. The first time we see that word used is when we sanctify the Sabbath on Friday night. So we take a cup of wine, and it's called kiddush, sanctification or separateness, holiness, separateness, sanctification, they're all coming from the same, it's all the same thing. When we leave the Shabbat, what do? Once again, we take wine and we do something called a separation, Havdalah. So once again, when we come into the Shabbat, the first time that the word separation, holiness, is used is something that we use to recite the Kiddush, blessing. We use this paragraph, which is brought in on the Shabbat, when God rested. So that word, the first time it's used, is in this reference to Shabbat. So we recite it during the blessing over the wine on the evening of Shabbat. So we see here something a clear, beautiful lesson. Our first lesson on Tu B'Shvat is number 1, that the verse here tells us that the Jewish people have to learn from the grape, from the vineyards. What do they have to learn? They have to learn that when you come into the land of Israel, number 1, you have to expel. You have to expel the inhabitants, because they're not into you being there, and they are going to torture you on your land. They are going to do intifadas, uprisings, civil rebellions. So number 1, the lesson of the vineyard is, just like when you plant a vineyard, first you get rid of the rocks, first you get rid of the enemies, and then you come and you plant the vines. That's number 1. Number 2, what's the purpose of the expulsion? It's not just because we don't like your face. It's because of the fact that God intended us to be a separate people and also in a separate land. Only when we are separate and not under the influence of the nations of the world can we be a light to the world. I read something very great, that for thousands of years the Gentiles have been assaulting and attacking the Jewish people and killing the Jewish people, isolating us basically. The underlining meaning of these attacks, this so-called terrorism, is really it's a message to us, telling us that we're not doing what we are supposed to be doing. We are supposed to be a separate and not assimilate and not take upon ourselves, the customs and the thought process of the Gentiles. And they can't express it, but really their souls, that's where it's coming from. When they attack us and thus separate us from the other nations of the world by attacking just us, this is the message that they really are giving, that, listen, it's not good for us either. The Gentiles are really crying out when they attack us and saying, listen, we're attacking you, but it's really because of the fact, and we're separating you from the others. But the message really is that you're supposed to be a light to us, and you're supposed to be beneficiating us, and you're not doing the job because of the fact that you're assimilating yourselves. You're joining up with the Gentiles. So therefore, that's why we're really attacking you. That's the cry of the Gentiles. For our sake, for the Gentiles' sake, we're hitting you over the head. Of course, once again, they will be punished for what they did, because their intentions were, of course, a mix, but a very, very, if you would dig through all the evil intentions, we would find some kind of pure intention underneath all that evil that they're intending for the Jewish people. So we have the grapes, we have the expulsion of the nations, and then of course when we come to the Shabbat, we pull out those grapes, and what do we say? We differentiate between the Sabbath and all the other days. We differentiate between the Jewish people and the nations. The nations of the world are not allowed to keep Shabbat. In fact, if a Gentile keeps Shabbat, the court can put that person to death. I've had some friends that converted, and as they were in the conversion process, they would, at my house or different places where we met, they would always do at least one prohibition on Shabbat in order not to keep Shabbat till they're ready to convert. So because it's a pretty strict punishment for those that keep Shabbat. So we're saying on the beginning of Shabbat, and we're saying when we leave Shabbat, we once again separate Havdalah. We're separating the Jewish people from the nations, separating the 6 days of work to the holy Shabbat. That's the idea behind when we come this year to Tu B'Shvat and we pull out grape juice, or we pull out the wine, or if you have maybe you have some grapes left from the summer, I don't know how you could do that. But anyways, that's the Jewish idea, but so to speak. That's the Jewish idea behind the idea of wine, grapes, is the separation of the land of Israel and the other nations of the world, the people of Israel, and also the country, the nation of Israel, the separation. That's the idea behind it. Okay, now today's class, in order to speak on moving on up to the land of Israel, we're going to take it from the top, as we usually like to do. Take it slow from the top. And we know that there's a principle in Judaism. The principle is that Maseh Avot Siman Lebanim. Whatever our forefathers or mothers did, this is a sign that this will happen once again throughout history. Whatever, as I like to say when I answer the phone, is, was, will be. Got to believe. What is, what was, is also what is now, and what will be. So what was in the past will be in the present, and also will be in the future. And we see that a million times, this concept in Judaism, what happened once happens again throughout history. It's kind of like a recycle, like in your face one more time, do it again, play it again, Sam. That's how it works. Okay, so before we take off here and we put on our seatbelts, here's a beautiful idea here just to start us out. The specialness, the merit that we have for those that are with us in the land of Israel, start dancing. For those of you that are outside the land of Israel, instead of dancing, maybe dance your way down to get your tickets to come to the land of Israel. Listen to this beautiful Torah. It says in the tractate of Tanit, page 10, it says the following, that when God created the world, which part of the world did he create first? And the Talmud tells us that God created the land of Israel first. The land of Israel was created first. The Iyun Yaakov, which is a commentator on the Talmud, he says the following, why was the land of Israel created before other places? Why? Because if you look at the same verse, as God created the world, the heavens and the earth, Breshit bara Elokim, the Torah teaches us, why was the world created? The world was created for Israel, for the people of Israel. The world was created for Torah. Those are the two beginnings. The two reshits. One is the people of Israel, and the second is the Torah of Israel. The whole world, the cosmos, the planets, the galaxies, the inventions, the electronics, the computers, the tweeting, the Facebook, it's all created for the Jewish people. It was all created for the Jewish people to help us in our mission to be a light upon ourselves, for ourselves, and also to others. So the Iyun Yaakov says, the commentator says, just like the world was created for the purpose of the people of Israel, the world was created, the world was created for the land of Israel on the same level. In other words, he's saying an unbelievable Torah. According to the blueprint of the world, what could have been was that really Adam and Eve were supposed to be the representatives of the Jewish people. They were really only supposed to be Jewish people in the world. But because of their sin, then not only are there Jewish people, but there's also 70 nations. The Iyun Yaakov says an unbelievable Torah. Just like there was supposed to be only the Jewish people, there was supposed to be only one place in the world that a person would live. To live, there was only one place. And that place is the land of Israel. That was the original blueprint of the world, was to create one people and one land. I know now it's very popular, 2 states for 2 peoples, but that's not the Torah view. That's the Erev Rav view, baby. So, but we're not finished here with this Iyun. I mean, he's coming up. He hit us pretty hard with that to understand this, that's the intention of God. That was the intention, one people, one land. But he goes further. We know on the first day, Breshit bara Elokim, when God created the world, on the first day, light. Where is that light? Where is that light? On Hanukkah 6 weeks ago, we spoke about that light. It's an understanding. It's not the Thomas Edison, hey, man, turn on the lights. No, it's a light, it's understanding. So there was a tremendous light in the world that existed that allowed one to see through all the exterior and go into the interior. That light was taken away and it was hidden in the Torah, and it was hidden for future world, in the world to come. So that light is hidden in the Torah, which enables you to see from one side of the world to the next. You could see what's coming down. That light was hidden in the Torah, was also hidden for the world to come. So listen to this. Iyun Yaakov says, on the same token, just like the light was created, okay, the light was taken from us and put on the side, hidden. Same too, that the land of Israel was supposed to be the only place in the world, but because God saw that the world was not ready for the land of Israel, Hashem created other countries, other places in the world. Beautiful Torah. And not only that, Hashem also created other places, not only for the Gentiles of the world, but also for the Jewish people, that if we're not on our best behavior, and if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, we're going to get tossed out here on our nose, and we're going to need a place, of refuge, and that's going to be outside the land of Israel. So on the same breath that God took away that special light because we did not merit it, and he hid it. The same too with the land of Israel. Instead of being the only place in the world to be, all of a sudden other countries, other places were created, and also which gave us an option, the Jewish people, an option of exile to leave. So thank God that we have the special merit, not that we deserve it, but we have the special merit to be here in such a special place, that this was the first creation, and really according to the blueprint, this is the only place to be. I mean, I'm saying it sounds kind of like maybe a little bit of flaky, but it's really the only place to be, because that was the original intention. If a person feels that the only place for me is the land of Israel, you have reached, or he or she, you have reached a tremendous pedestal, you have come back to the first light of creation. You've come back to the original blueprint of what God wanted, to be only one land that there should have been in the world, to be in the land of Israel. So if that's your feeling, you're on the right track. Okay. Now, from the beginning, who's the beginning? Abraham is the beginning. Abraham, right? Abraham, the first Jew. Abraham, we know he represents coming to the land of Israel. Okay, we were taught that in kindergarten, and we were taught that as we went on. But tonight, we're going to have to put on a seatbelt today, we're going to really go for a spin here. It's not so simple. It's true that Abraham lifted up the flag. The Rav Dessler writes in Michtam Eliyahu that if a person is successful in coming to the land of Israel, it's only because of the fact that Abraham for men, Sarah for women came here, and the fact that he came and with all the difficulties of being in a new place, leaving your family, because of the fact that he was successful, that allows us a chance to make it and to be successful here. So of course, he's our torch, he's our light. But let's see that if we look left and right, we see that not everyone is in Israel. Not everyone is in the land of Israel. A lot of good Jews outside the land of Israel. It might just be you out there. So how did this happen? How did this happen? We have to go back to the beginning. Abraham. Listen to this unbelievable Torah. The Talmud tells us in Tractate Yevamot, it tells us the following law, that if a person, God forbid, is married, not that God forbid he's married, but if a person is married and they've been together for 10 years and do not have children, that's enough time to understand there's some kind of problem here reproducing. So therefore, a person is advised to, the man and the woman advised to look at other places, because a man could remarry somebody else, or the woman could remarry, and then that will work. But this is not working. So after 10 years, a person is advised to, you don't have to, but a person is advised to separate, divorce, and look for a different spouse in order, because the reason why God brought us here to the world was in order for us to multiply. And that's the mitzvah of getting married. That's the mitzvah of getting married, is not just to be with some, buddy. It's to bring children to the world. That's the real commandment. Okay, so we learn this from, the Talmud learns it from Abraham. It says that Abraham, when he came to the land of Israel at the age of 75, he was here for 10 years and he had no children. And when he turned 86, it says that Sarah suggested to Abraham that Abraham would take another wife. And that's what happened. He took Hagar and they had a son, Ishmael. We spoke about this last week in the third part of Islam for Dummies. Okay, so question is that why did the clock not start ticking with Abraham when he was in Chutz La'aretz, when he was outside the land of Israel? I just said that once he came to Israel at the age of 75, him and Sarah, the clock starts ticking, the 10-year period. He gets to the age of 85, he comes to his 86th birthday, and then he marries Hagar, and then they have a child. But what about the years before that? Before that they were married in Chutz La'aretz. So listen to what the Rosh, who's a commentator on the Talmud, here's what he writes in his commentary. This is in the Rosh, in the sixth chapter. It's in the paragraph 12. Unbelievable. I mean, I would never be able to say this, so I'm going to just say what the Rosh says. It's unbelievable Torah here. I mean, I told it to my rabbi last night. He said it's a tremendous chidush. He couldn't believe that it actually, said that. So listen to this. Hold on tight. It says, why was it that Abraham did not have children outside the land of Israel? We see that he did have children when he came to Israel. He had Ishmael and he had Isaac. So we see that it's possible that he could have children. So why did God work it out that no kids outside the land of Israel? Why is that? Listen to what he says. Because of the fact that God commanded Abraham to go and leave the land of his forefathers, land of his family. And Abraham, I'm quoting word from word, Abraham became lazy with this commandment of coming to the land of Israel. And he did not go immediately to the land of Israel. He did not go immediately to the land of Israel. And even when he came to the land of Israel, notice, most people don't notice this, but you're going to notice this. You're going to get it. Abraham came into the land of Israel twice. One, first time when he was 70 years old. That's when he got the message that the Jewish people will be subservient to a nation for 400 years. He was 70. He comes back to outside the land of Israel. 5 years later, at 75, he comes back here. 5 years he was gone. Why was that? He says the following, so we have two things. Number one, when God told him to leave, he was lazy, the words of the Rosh. He was lazy and he did not go immediately. Number two, even when he was here, he left here and he was gone for 5 years. So therefore, God punished him. I mean, I can't believe people are still on their seats. They haven't flown out the windows, off the ceiling here. Unbelievable Torah. We see the torch, the light of the land of Israel, our mentor for coming to the land of Israel. Wasn't so easy. He was punished. According to the words of the Rosh, he was punished. This difficulty is a root. And when a root, when you take root, it has an influence on the continuation of the tree or the flower. And therefore, if we look in the mirror and we see difficulties of making the move, or once we're here, understand where it's coming from. It's not just us. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like in the genes, not Levi's, but in the genes. Okay, now we'll keep on hitting hard over here. We're going to keep on hitting hard. Okay, so that's Abraham had a difficulty coming to the land of Israel. He was punished. He did not have children outside the land of Israel. Okay, now the next phase of Jewish history is Jewish people go down to Egypt. The tribes go down to Egypt. There's an unbelievable verse. It says at the end of the portion of the week, Vayigash, the last verse says that the Jewish people held on tight settled in tight to the land of Egypt. There's a famous Kli Yakar, the commentator, talks about how this was a sin, that God did not intend them to dig in and, start living off the fat of the land of Egypt and, making a life for themselves and doing well. But that's what the Kli Yakar, we're not going to go into that because that should be an old trick by everybody that's listening to this class. So we're here to try to bring in a little bit of new kind of angles over here. So if we notice in the Torah, the verse after that is the next week's portion is Vayechi, and there is no space between the last verse and the first verse. We know that there has to be a space of 9 letters between portions of the week. So if you're looking at the Torah scroll, so you see very clearly, you could see like a lot of times, you see where the beginning and end of a portion is, but not in this case. In this case, not so. Why is that? So it's written by the Tzanzor Rebbe, Tzanzor Rebbe writes, and it's also in a few other places an unbelievable Torah. Chatam Sofer also writes this. Because of the attitude of the Jewish people that came down and they started settling in, doing well in Egypt, therefore we know that the next verse talks about Jacob wanted to tell when the redemption was. So now it says that God took away his vision, which means if you look at those two verses, the last week and the new Vayigash and Vayechi, the two, and you can't separate, you can't see anything. It just looks like a bunch of letters. Because that's exactly what happened. Because of the fact, why was Jacob not able to see and tell us, predict us what would happen in the future? Why is that? Because of the fact that that's what Jacob saw. Jacob saw the Jewish people living off the land, and that's exactly what he was staying away from. That's what he didn't want to happen to the Jewish people. That alone, that fact alone closed his vision totally. And that's why there is no space. It's all blurred. It's all just blurred, those two portions of the week. So we have here the Tzanzer Rabbi says unbelievable Torahs here. Unbelievable. Once again, I mean, I would never be able to say this kind of stuff, but he's saying this, so let's hit it. He asked the question to explain why the holy tribes, why didn't they not immediately come back to the land of Israel? Why did not they return to the land of Israel? The answer is, this is based on the verse that we just spoke about, that the Jewish people were in Egypt, and they were in specifically the town of Goshen, and they held on tight, and they multiplied, and they did very well in the land of Egypt. The Targum Yonatan ben Uziel, explains the following explanation on this verse. He says that the Jewish people in the land of Egypt, they built for them Torah study halls. So far so good. Or we'll see, not so good. Okay, remember that. Okay, what could be bad about building Torah studies? We'll see what was the problem there. Also, there's a problem with that. And also, they built for themselves mansions in the land of Egypt. Might sound familiar today. And they inherited, they inherited agriculture fields and vineyards. On this verse that the Jewish people are digging into the lifestyle of Egypt. That's what he says is going on. So listen what he says. Tzanzer Rebbe says the following: when a person is in the land, living in the land of Israel, his vision is more of a vision of holiness. Why? Because the land of Israel, as we know, the Talmud tells us that even breathing the air makes one very, very wise here. Okay, makes a person very, very wise. And a person in the land of Israel has more of appreciation for spiritual than for the material. That's the way it should be. And if a person is in that direction, the land of Israel will help them in that direction. But in outside the land of Israel, exactly the opposite. The pull and the push is for materialism. That's what the push and pull is for. And also, to another problem in Chutz La'aretz, we know that the environment there is an environment of impurity. So you have the pull towards materialism, plus you have the impurity just by the fact that you're breathing the air there, you're living there, you're walking the streets over there. It's influencing you, even though you don't realize it, it's having this influence you. And then he writes, because of this fact that the people living outside of Israel are influenced by the impurities, what happens is they begin calling light darkness and darkness light. Why? Because we know that there's a verse in the Torah that tells us that bribery, if a person is bribed, then this will blind him to the truth. If a person's getting money, if he's on the take, if his yeshivas are, if he's getting paid, he's not able here to see, he's not able to see here the light, the truth. So therefore, the people outside the land of Israel are beginning to say, light is dark and dark is light. And where do we see this? We see this by the holy spies, he writes. They said, what's the land of Israel all about? It's a land that eats up its inhabitants. Can you imagine saying that about the land of Israel? It's a land that eats up its inhabitants. Not only that, he writes, he says that the Jews outside the land of Israel say that their Gentiles are better than the Gentiles of the land of Israel. Our Gentiles are better than your Gentiles. So it's better if we stay here outside the land of Israel because our Gentiles are on a higher level. Okay. Now, he says, not only is this true generally speaking outside the land of Israel, but listen to this. In the situation of Egypt, Not only were they breathing in that impure air, but they built themselves separate communities. That community was called Goshen. And not only that did they build separate communities, but they also built up study halls of Torah. And they were sure because of this, because they lived in segregated communities, they were sure that it was better to live in segregated communities in Egypt with our study halls and our Torah and our prayers than to live in the land of Israel with all the balagan, with all the problems of the land of Israel, those nations and those bad Gentiles over there. And therefore, the Tzanzor Rabbi goes on and he writes, I'm just going to give where it's at, I forgot. We're on the portion of the week of Vayechi, and it's the third subject matter, and it's in the book called Shefa Chaim by the Tzanzor Rebbe. Okay, it's on page 419. He has about 3 pages straight of total TKO knockouts, touchdowns here. Unbelievable stuff. I'm just giving a little bit of what he's saying over here. Anyways, they thought that because of the fact they live in segregated communities, that Tzanzor Rabbi goes on, they were sure that it was better for their avodat Hashem, for their spiritual benefit. It was better for them to be outside the land of Israel and Egypt. And not only that, they could also, it's a very important part of Judaism, is a person to go, out to the fields or into the mountains and be by yourself in isolation, because then you could speak to God, and then your avodat Hashem will improve tremendously. So they were sure that they would be able to do that thing, they would be able to do those isolation acts and their worshiping of God much better outside the land of Israel. Now, we said, what's the problem? We understand the problem according to what Targum Yonatan said, that they built up mansions in the land of Egypt. We understand it's a problem. We understand that it's a problem that they started inheriting or buying up agriculture plots, fields, vineyards. They started getting heavy into the real estate of Egypt, so to speak. But what's the problem with building up yeshivas? What's that problem? Listen to this unbelievable chidush, tremendous new insight. What it says that Jacob sends Judah down to Egypt before the other brothers. He sends them down to set up a study hall. But listen to the words of Jacob. Jacob says, litaken. He didn't say to build. He said to fix up. So the Tzanzor Rebbe, an unbelievable, just like, let's get up and dance, like, woohoo, party time. The Tzanzor Rebbe says that these words of Jacob were exact. I don't want you to build up buildings, beautiful yeshivas. I want you to take an old rundown building, litaken, to fix it up so you'll be able to learn Torah there. But that's a certain message when you're in a place which has been, you fixed it up and, it's a used place. It's not a new building. Doesn't take your eyes out of its sockets. It's very, very modest. Very, very, not like, screaming at you. So this is an unbelievable chidush. That was the idea behind Jacob's words. I don't want you to build yeshivas. I want you, till we leave Egypt, I want you to find an old rundown shack, and I want you to fix it up a little bit so we're able to learn in there, no leaks or something. And that's what I want you, those are my intentions. Okay, once again, I highly advise, there's a lot of other stuff, but I'm going to try to run as much as possible, because Tu B'Shvat is coming, it's not going to wait for us. So I'm going to keep on going on. So we have now going down to Egypt. This created a root problem. We talked about Abraham creating a root problem of coming to the land of Israel. We have, once again, the tribes and then later on, the generations in Egypt, that they became very, very accustomed, and they became a lot of them did well. Now, this should not be an eye-opener for people. I don't want to get into details, it's a different subject, but unfortunately, there were Jews in the Holocaust that did very well during the Holocaust. Okay, let's just leave it at that. There were many Jews that did very well during the Holocaust monetarily. Okay, so this is not a new phenomenon. It's not eye-opening here. Where do we see this? Listen to this, some unbelievable Torahs. The Medrash Rabbah tells us in two places. It gives us a little bit of an insight. How did the Jews of Egypt, how did they live? So listen to this, not exactly what we thought. Listen to what they say. So we have two sources here. Actually, we have three sources here. Great. We have three sources here. Number one, the first source talks about first source tells us the following, that why did God bring the plague of darkness to Egypt? What was the idea behind darkness? Every plague has a reason why it was given to the Egyptians. Okay, so why was this plague given? And the very interesting answer, the Chazal tell us, the rabbis tell us, the fact that God was going to kill off 80%. God was going to kill off 80% of the Jewish people because they did not want to leave Egypt. Life was good for them. They did not want to leave Egypt. Okay, this might sound like news today, but it's not. It's old news. But because of the root problem in the Jewish people, we are suffering from this phenomena till this very day. So listen to the words. Why? Okay, let's get a little bit of an insight of these wicked people, who they were. Okay, 80% don't leave Egypt. Only 20% leave Egypt. Amazing. Okay, why is that? Number one, it says the following in Shmot Rabbah 14:3. 14:3. Check it out. Because of the fact that the wicked of Israel, many of them had positions in government institutions. You heard it right. Many of them had positions in government institutions. And many of them were well-to-do. And many of them were honored. Okay, were honored by the Egyptians. And they did not want to leave. Something very different than we're accustomed. When we sit down, for that Seder on Pesach, there's not too many tables that are talking about this problem. We're talking about a lot of other things, but something that's, something that plagues us, I hate to use the pun, something that plagues us about we're still hanging around outside the land of Israel. Okay, let's look in the mirror over here. Okay, number two. Our next source is same book, but a different location, 15a. This is a real doozer here. It says, based on a verse in the Song of Songs, it says, my beauty, what are you doing here? That's the verse in Shir Hashirim, in Song of Songs. What are you doing? So Chazal, the rabbis say, what is this verse talking about? Okay, what is this talking about? The commentator Eitz Yosef says on this verse, what God is asking the Jewish people, how come you become impure? In which way have the Jewish people become impure? Listen to this. The Eitz Yosef, the commentator, explains the following. Many in Egypt wanted Moses to redeem them from the slavery, and then they would remain in Egypt free men. That's what their idea was. Why? Because they did not want to leave the place of their birth. They did not want to leave the place of their birth. They had become accustomed to Egypt, to the malls there, to the streets, to the ways, to the stadiums over there, all kinds of ideas over there. You know, they had become accustomed to this.
Were they Egyptians?
Yeah, right. Okay, so that's a little bit of an insight. A third insight. This week's portion, Bishalach, when Pharaoh has sent off the Jewish people, all of a sudden his advisors come and say, what have you done? What have you done, Pharaoh? Do you understand who you've released here? This is, this is brought down in the same book, but 20-2. And what does it say in Unbelievable Torah? The advisors come up and say, Paro, man, you lost your mind? You lost your marbles here? You don't understand. The people that you just tossed out here, this is our economy. You've allowed the Jewish people who are business people, these are the words, these are business people, you've allowed them to leave. You've allowed them to take all their wealth. You've allowed them, all the people. If you remember about a month and a half ago, there's a gigantic attack in Paris, I think it was Saturday or Saturday night, 5 different places, 120 people died. They were shot up by the ISIS. Remember that one? So the president of France told the Jewish people, I don't want you to leave. What's he talking about? Because they know that once the Jewish people leave, the whole economy. So Paro says, oh my God, I didn't look at it in that manner. I didn't think about all the business people, all the deals, the real estate, the whole deal. I didn't think about that. And he changes his mind. Let's go after the Jews. Let's go get the Jews. So we see unbelievable picture. 80% of the Jewish people, that's where they're holding. That's where they're holding. Unbelievable. And to boot, besides for these 80%, a person might say that, oh, these were the wicked guys, you know? Some were definitely wicked. But remember the words of the Tzanzer Rebbe. The Tzanzer Rebbe tells us no, that these people had religious beliefs why it was better to stay in Egypt. We talked about this 5-10 minutes ago. Remember his words. It's not just the people with the earrings and the people with the necklaces, the cool crowd. It's not them. It's also the frummy crowd, not just the cool crowd. It's not that you can't be cool and frum, but if you catch my drift.
We are.
Right. But anyways, so this is an unbelievable thing. There's some kind of, besides for the people that are the business people, but there could also be religious people that were business people, So they're into the whole materialism of what's going down in Egypt. Okay, so that didn't work out too well. So now we know when the Jewish people are about to come into the land of Israel, Moses sends out the 12 spies, and we all know what happened there. What happened there is that the spies came back. These were tzaddikim, these were righteous people. What did they say? 10 out of the 12. 10 out of the 12. Is that 80%? 10 out of 12?
10 out of 12, it's close.
Close, yeah, interesting, right? Once again, there's that number, pretty close. So 10 out of the 12 say, listen, spiritually, it's a land that we don't have a shot. You have to understand. They have there's a lot of when you think about what they're talking about, they had a tremendous case. Think about it. They had a tremendous case over here. We're living in the desert. We don't need to go to the bathroom because we have special food. We have special spiritual food that you don't even need to go to the bathroom. We don't have to work. We don't have to go to the laundromat. We don't have to do the wash. We don't have to do any of this. It's all taken care of us. We don't have to go to the shoe store to buy shoes because we have everything is taken care of for us. All our needs are taken care of. Now what are we going to do? You're going to bring us into the land of Israel? Well, that's really fun. We're going to gain war for 7 years? Well, it's really a great time to study. When you're at war, yeah, it's really a prime time for studying, yeah? I think it's better spiritually if we stay here in the desert. That's That's what was behind the decision. Once again, a spiritual flag that was raised. So we see once again what happened after that one. We see another root being planted here, which makes it that much more difficult. So we have Abraham. We have Abraham who planted that certain root that makes it difficult for us to leave outside the land of Israel. Then we have the people that came down to Egypt, and then the people that left Egypt, or more so to speak, did not leave Egypt. That's another big root, to hold us back. And now we have the spies. One more, boom, tugging us down here, over here. Okay, moving on up.
It's 80.33333. 83.33333.
Well, it's lucky. Listen, at this time of the day, to make that figure, you got to really give you credit, brother. Okay, so, the beat goes on. We ain't stopping this train. We're going on. The locomotive here is rolling. Come time, we spoke about this a little bit. A couple weeks ago on Mount Gerizim. If you remember, 52 years after the Babylonian Empire takes root, we have to speak Tu B'Shvat talk. So we're talking a lot of roots, planting, etc., growing. So just try to roll with the punches here. Anyways, when they took root, the Babylonians, so 52 years later, we know that the prophet Jeremiah, via God, told the Jewish people, 70 years you'll be in exile. 52 years, depending how you count it. We're not going to get into that. Go back 2 weeks. You'll understand the subject, the answer. But 52 years later, Zerubbabel comes up to the land of Israel with how many people? He's building the temple. He has permission from the king. I mean, anybody out there, if you heard that, you would be running, you'd be running to the land of Israel, right? Every one of us would be running to the land of Israel. Hey, we have permission to build a temple, second temple. We'd all be running. Okay, not so. Only a few thousand ran. Interesting enough, only a few thousand ran. Why is everybody hanging out? What's going on over here? Okay, you think maybe it's like by chance, but it doesn't work out that way. Okay, some years pass, some 18 years pass. 18 years pass, we're at the 70 mark here of the destruction of the temple. Okay, 52 was the Babylonian Empire beginning. Now we're at 70 years after the Babylonians destroyed the temple, the first one. We're allowed to come, okay, we're coming back now. So Ezra comes back. Wow, he's Ezra. The Torah could have been given on his hands. He's an unbeliever. He's on the level of Moses, man. We got a Moses with us here, So what happens? How many people come back with him? 42,000. We quoted historians that there were at least males, there were at least 500,000 Jews in Babylonia and Egypt that did not come back. At least. Okay? So 42,000 is a shot in the bucket. It's nothing. So what's going on over here? So listen, very interesting. Let's go over various sources here. What was the outlook? How did various scholars look at other scholars that were in Babylonia? Now, even though this is after, of course, the temple was destroyed, but the attitude of Jews in the land of Israel did not change. The Jews in the land of Israel understood the damage that was done by the Jews, the religious Jews, that did not come back to the land of Israel, because God intended the history to be ended. That's all she wrote, folks. That was supposed to be the end. That's all, folks. That was supposed to be it. But that's the way it did not happen, because of the fact, as we'll see now, we did not come back. So I hope we don't run out of time over here, so I'm going to roll it by us. We're right now in Midrash Rabbah, Shir HaShirim 8-10. It says in Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, we have a sister, but she's very small. What's this hinting to? It's hinting to, Chazal, our rabbis tell us, this is talking about the Jewish people that came back from Babylonia during the to build the second temple, they were very, very lacking in numbers in the population. That's why it says, that's what it's hinting to, that our sister is young and small. Going on over here, it says, go follow it. It says that if the Jewish, the verse in Song of Songs goes on and says, if I would have built a wall, what does that mean? Built a wall? You tell me that your sister is small, which means that not many Jews came back. What's this wall being built? All in all, it's just another brick in the wall. These are the Jewish people that came back to Israel from Babylonia. If the Jewish people would have came back like a wall, Rashi says, what does it mean like a wall? If they would have come back in numbers, if they would have come back in strength is in numbers, then the, what?
En masse.
En masse. Then, listen to this, hold on over here. If you're on any pills, I don't know if you should listen to this. A lot of Americans are.
70%.
If the Jewish people would have come up in mass to the land of Israel like a heavy wall, wow, this is a wall, the wall of China, Berlin, man, this is massive over here. The Beit HaMikdash, the temple, would not have been destroyed. The temple would not have been destroyed. I'm glad everyone is okay, we're still hitting hard over here. It says the following, that Rabbi Zera, who was from Babylonia, so he was coming, he was here in Israel, I don't know, for a visit or whatever. Once again, we're talking about after the temple is destroyed. Listen to the sentiment of the people of land of Israel. Listen to what the Torah is telling us, that the sentiment is really hard against them. Okay, here's what happens. So Rabbi Zera goes to the marketplace and he asks a person he buys something, you have to weigh it. So he tells this simple person in the marketplace in Israel, in land of Israel, he tells him, be very, very careful when you're, one of the prohibitions in the Torah is you have to make sure that you're exact when it comes to weighing produce, etc. You have to be honest. So he says, be very, very careful. Listen to this. So this simple guy in the land of Israel, he says, listen to me. You're telling me to be careful? Well, let me tell you something. Okay? He says, I want you to get out of my store. I want you to leave my store. Well, that's not exactly, Southern hospitality. That ain't Southern hospitality, honey. Why is that? He says the following, because of you and your kind, the temple was destroyed. You and your kind, because you stayed in Babylonia and you didn't come up here because of you and your kind. Okay, the temple was destroyed. So Rav Zera is thinking, what kind of, I don't understand. Rav Zera, this source tells us, he's thinking to himself, what in the world is this guy talking about? Because of us in Babylonia, us religious people in Babylonia, what about the Jews of Israel? Why don't they have a share in the destruction of the temple? Oh, it's just us bad guys? No. Anyways, that's what his thought was. He left the store. He was thrown out of the store. And then, lo and behold, he comes into a yeshiva. He comes into a yeshiva and he hears Rabbi Shila giving a Torah discussion. What does he say? He says the following, that if the Jewish people would have gone up in mass like a heavy wall out of Babylonia, if they would have come back to the land of Israel, okay, the second temple would not have been destroyed. He can't believe it. It's exactly what that simple Jew told him when he tossed him out of his store in the marketplace. Maybe it was Machane Yehuda. Rabbi Zera says, well, that simple guy, that Am Haaretz, taught me a tremendous lesson. That simpleton taught me a tremendous lesson. Okay, we're not holding any punches here. We're going on here. Says the following, Rabbi Shimon Reish Lakish, Rabbi Shimon Bar Lakish, he was swimming in the Jordan, and all of a sudden he wanted to get out. And somebody, a rabbi, his name was Rabbi Bar Chana, he gave him a hand. And he says, no, I don't want your hand. God, he swears, okay, not like a curse, but like an oath, swears, you got to be careful today. I give an oath that God hates you and all of the people in Babylonia because of the fact that if you would have come back with Ezra in the time of the beginning of the Second Temple, then